Custom wavetables are an easy and controlled way to save a sound design idea and to turn it into more sound design ideas. So today I want to show you and convince you that you should make your own wavetables. Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. As I said, we're going to look into wavetables today. Now I have a bunch of interesting different things lined up. What I'm going to do is I'm first going to show you how you can actually import wavetables when you already have a sound. And then I want to show you also the process of me actually sound designing the sound for a wavetable. The reason why I'm going to do it this way is because it's much more interesting to look at the importing of the wavetable rather than sound designing an individual wavetable. Obviously, importing a wavetable and knowing how to do that applies to a whole bunch of different wavetables that you're going to make, to all of them in fact. Whereas just sound designing one wavetable will only teach you how to make one of them. Now you may notice that my camera looks a little bit different. I'm currently recording this with my webcam because my main camera broke. I'm trying to get that replaced, but it currently needs some time for that replacement to actually come through. So without further ado, let's have a look at this project here. As you can see, this is a project that I specifically use for wavetable making. You can see the group that I have for the wavetable making here. And there's other things going on in this session as well, bunch of different tests, bunch of different ideas that I have, but this project is completely for wavetable making. Now you might have already seen my stream where I made wavetables. In that case, this video will not bring any new information for you, it will just be a nice recap. But the essential idea is that we have a sound source, we then record 2 bars of that sound source with some change in there, and then we import it into a separate faceplant instance for further processing and cleaning up and eventually turning into a wavetable. The reason why I use faceplant is because I saw the video by Black Marvin. He explained how to make good wavetables and I basically adapted those techniques myself, and he used faceplant, so therefore I also used faceplant. That being said though, each and every one of the wavetable synthesizers, your Serum, your faceplant, your Vital, whatever other wavetable synthesizer you have, probably has a few different algorithms to actually import and create wavetables from samples, which is what we're using here. So it might be a good idea to experiment a little bit with the synths that you're most comfortable with, see how the different kind of algorithms stack up in terms of quality, in terms of the morphing that is happening, and then make a decision on which of the different synths you're going to use to actually create your wavetables. So as you can see, I sound designed something here. Let's actually play through these sounds here. You can hear that there's a lot of change, a lot of morphing going on, which is what we're looking for in a wavetable. Now the way that I sound design these is fairly important. You want to stay consistent in terms of the root note as well as the length that you use. So in my case I'm using C1 here and I have a length of 2 bars, as you can see. So that's the way that this project is set up and that's the way that I create all of my wavetables. Now there's a little bit of a tip here that I wanted to give you right out of the gate. As you can see, we're not directly recording from the track that has the audio on it. We actually use this wrapper here, which is basically an empty group that sits around the track. The reason for that is that it makes it a little bit easier to substitute different things. For one, what you would be able to do is have multiple different sources and combine them together if you really wanted to. But second, I sometimes have issues with when I change instruments, say that I'm changing from one synth to another synth, by really just deleting the synth and then putting a different synth in there, then it would unlink the actual recording input here on this track. Therefore with the wrapper it doesn't really do that, because obviously you're not changing this track itself. You're changing whatever this track is wrapped around, right? We're changing the source here, but not this track here. Okay, so now that we have a few sounds, what we want to do is we want to actually import them. And to do that, the easiest way is to just hit Ctrl J on each of them, like this, like this, like that. That will consolidate them into files. If there's any residue left and you cut it off and you don't consolidate that, that might end up being part of the file. So this just makes sure that what you're seeing here is the actual full-length file. Then the second thing that we need to do is make sure that Ableton does not still have these files open, that you're actually able to import them. This was a trick shown to me by DeadUpSci and this massively sped up my workflow. So what you do is you hold Shift here and then you select all of the samples and then you can crop clips like that. So this will make them unique files. And now if I go into the faceplant that I actually use to create and save my wavetables, I can start the import process. So for me, I just open up this window here and then we can drag in the first sample. If we don't do crop sample, the sample will not actually read here. Now there's a little bit of a strange thing going on in the sense that the pitch that is written right here, you obviously want that to match the pitch that is in the MIDI, but this one is 1 octave higher. So whenever this says C2, right down here, it is going to be C1. So this C1 matches that C2, and you can actually verify that that's the case by looking if this is a single cycle. If you can see a single main sine wave in there that represents this lowest harmonic. So what I want to do is I want this to match exactly. So this is going to change the waveform a little bit. And now I want to look at the different algorithms that are being used here. And in the case of phase plant, you can see that we have a few different algorithms here. So this is the naive version, and you can see how it morphs between them. And we're getting a pretty clean morph here. It does look like it's moving around a little bit. So let's track the next one. Maybe this one is a little bit better. You can see it stays a little bit more steady, I would say. A little bit more in place. But maybe in this case the lock fundamental works better. Now you can see that it's really starting to move around, so this is not what we're after. As you can see, there's some kind of wobble in here, and this is really not what we're looking for. You can also look at this overview here right in Faceplant itself, because that gives you an overview of all of the different cycles at the same time placed one after the other. So if I put this at correlate, you can see the difference. If I put this at naive, you can see the difference. Maybe this lock all works well for this one. Let's see. You can see that we now have the lock all, and you can actually see that the waveform is significantly different in this one. That's because it's going to lock all of the phases of all of the different harmonics, as the name suggests. So if we go back to correlate, you can see that we're losing this kind of classical high gritty area right here, and some of the other kind of unique characteristics that sit in this waveform live, especially in the last part of the waveform. So I'm actually going to import this with correlate. We click done like that. And now what we can do is we can make a selection. Say that we don't want to have the start here. Maybe these first few waveforms aren't really what we're looking for. You can see that this first one especially is kind of like a hard snap. So let's say that we want to have it from the second one moving forward. I want to hold shift and I want to select everything but the first one. Holding shift, all of that. I hit Control C and then I select everything. Control V, and that will remove the first bit here. You can see that that snap is no longer there. It is still a little bit there, so let's actually maybe, or maybe that has to do with, it's still a little bit messy here at the start. You can see it's still rolling around a little bit, so let's actually select this bit here, Control C, Control V, and you can see that the waveform moves around a little bit, and now we should have a cleaner kind of morphing at the start of this wavetable. So we hit done again, and this gives us a cleaner wavetable. Now some other things that we can do is remove some of the DC offset. That is usually kind of what you want to make sure that the wave is always in the middle. The other thing that we can do is normalize this. We can do that based on the RMS of the wavetable, the global peak of the wavetable, or each of the individual peaks of the frames. I like to do it with the frames because that gives us the loudest sound. But sometimes what you'll notice is that then the morphing effect kind of is destroyed if one wavetable is significantly louder than another wavetable. In this case right here you can see an example of where the wave kind of wobbles a little bit. So maybe for this example what we want to do is use the global peak. Select everything, normalize global peaks. It kind of still has that. Let's try RMS if that's a better one. RMS is a little bit lower in volume, but you can see that it looks a little bit better, I should say. Maybe we'll just go for the global one. I ended up with the frame peak one. I do want a kind of loudness in the start here. You could see the other two were slightly lower in loudness at the beginning. So now with all of these modifications done, we can save the wavetable. Now personally I like to just number them. This is another tip here. I don't like to sit here and try to come up with names because I'm going to name them all the same way. At the end of the day it's all going to sound a little bit FME, a little bit gritty, so you end up using the same kind of keywords to come up with the name. In this case I just number them and leave the naming for another time. So this is going to be 32. It's the next number in line. Let's hit OK. And that's it. That's our wavetable. Let's have a listen to what it sounds like. You can hear that that correlates fairly well with the sound that we have here. You can hear the same kind of qualities in that sound. So that's it, that's the easy bit. That is creating a wavetable from a sample that you already have. Let's now look into a method of creating actual samples like this. So I like to move these over. These are all of the temporary files that I use. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to delete everything that's on here. And I want to see if I can implement some cool sound design techniques here. Now the first thing that I want to do is get a little bit more of an interesting wave than just a normal saw wave. And to do that, I'm actually going to use one of my tones from my tones pack. So let's see, maybe go with 80. Let's see what that sounds like. That should be nice. We can use a little bit of a remap to add some movement here. I'm just going to select a spot. We can kind of see what it does. Yeah, why not? We can go for a shape like this. This kind of moves everything away from this point here, which is determined there by where this point sits. Obviously you can see how this movement is happening here. So something like this should be nice. Let's have a listen. That's a nice start, but really one type of movement isn't usually enough movement for a wavetable like this. What I like to do early on in the beginning is just have one macro that sweeps through the wavetable, so I can assign any modulation that I just want to linearly play through the wavetable to this macro here. So let's have a listen to what we have now in terms of sound. Not really that interesting, right? There's not a lot of stuff happening. What I would like is to use a phaser. Now a phaser is really useful here because of all of the phasing that it implements. Obviously with a phaser, what you hear is that there's a lot of different phasing things going on, especially if you go into the filters and use these 48 ones. So let's boost this up a little bit and let's have a listen to what that sounds like if I assign this to the same macro. Already a lot more movement going on. Now what I like to do is sometimes complement these kind of upwards movement with one downwards movement. The way that we can do that in this case is maybe with another filter. I want to add a filter here, maybe a bandpass with a little bit of resonance, and we'll give this a little bit of lower mix. And I want to add maybe a downsample in this one and maybe slightly introduce that as well. So what we're going to do here is have this go up and have this go down. This is hopefully going to create a nice extra bit of texture on there. Not really the sound that I'm looking for. Let's see what happens without the downlifter. Not really the quality that I was looking for. Let's try some other sounds in here. Maybe a formant. We can try it like that if the movement goes downwards like this. Let's see if we can use a different type of distortion. Let's go for maybe the tape saturator on here. Just add a little bit of that in there without any modulation. We get a little bit of distortion towards the end, so I'm actually going to have the mix go down as well as the drive. I don't want this to distort so hard, I just want this to slightly saturate. I'm also going to have the resonance go down as well at the same time. And maybe we'll do the resonance of this one as well, because this might also be introducing those heavy spikes there. Now obviously when we're making wavetables, what is going to happen within the synth is that it's going to take any stereo signal that we give it and it's going to turn it into mono. That doesn't mean that we cannot use stereo effects to create some extra movement in there. It's actually a really cool technique because of all of the phase cancellation that will happen once you convert it to mono. So we can use something like the hyper dimension. I'm going to set this to retrigger for consistency. I'm going to add a little bit of a dimension to this with a low size, actually size at the minimum. You can hear that it starts to separate in terms of the detuning that is happening here. Actually going to lower these values so that that happens slower. You can hear that over time it starts to separate, and once we sum that to mono it starts to cancel out. So let's see if we can record this. So now you can see we have quite the amount of sound. What you'll see is that I recorded from a little bit before. That's because in Ableton, if you hit record, the automation is going to jump. It's not going to instantly snap, and therefore you're going to get clicks from your synth. You want to avoid that, so we start recording a little bit early. So let's clean up this sample. I'm going to hit Ctrl J, and then I'm going to set this to 0. And from here on, it's just the same thing over and over again. Now here you might want to do a little bit of extra post-processing. Mainly you want to maybe compress it a little bit so that it's a little bit more uniform. For now though, I think it will be okay, because we can also fix this within the importing once we select which type of gaining we want to use. So again, I want to go in here. I want to go into the editor. And I just want to crop clip, and then I want to drag it in here, and we can start looking at which one to use. Now what I like to do is actually look at this one a lot more. This is an easier way to kind of judge which of the frames looks the nicest. There seems to be very little difference between correlate and the naive one for this one. The lock fundamental seems a little bit strange, like it becomes a lot more messy towards the end there. And the lock all is just very, very different here. So let's maybe go for correlate again. I've found the most success with the correlate. You can actually see the movement that is happening in here. You can see both that high-end movement that's happening, as well as the wave kind of being pushed back from the remap effect that we used before. So we're going to accept this, and now it's again remove the DC, and I'm going to normalize each frame, and you can see what kind of wavetable we have. Let's have a listen. Now the reason why this is so cool, why it's so nice to create wavetables, is because usually with wavetables it's really quick to create unique synth sounds. So I want to add a random here, and I want to assign this to the frame here. I'm going to set this to 0 here, and then I'm going to turn on the arpeggiator, which is set to 1/16. We shall introduce a delay here with sync, and I want to ping pong that for a standard kind of psytrance delay. And now we get something like this. And the cool thing about a folder full of wavetables is that you can just play this and listen to the different wavetables that come up to make your choice in which synth that you want to use. So as you can hear, the more that you expand the amount of wavetables that you have, the more that you can actually do with the different wavetables that you have in terms of sound design. It is the same philosophy that sits behind my tones pack, only that you have one extra way of movement. The philosophy behind my tones pack was that you could open up the pack, click on one of the sounds, create your sounds around here, and then you could click around for the different kind of cycles that you want. And you would always get some kind of tone that would create cool sounds, obviously. That was the criteria that I used to actually determine which of the tones that I created ended up in the pack itself. So a pack full of wavetables is the same philosophy, only that you have one extra dimension in the sense that you can obviously morph the frame that you have. That's something you cannot do with the tones pack because they're single cycles. So that's everything that I wanted to show off today. If you have any questions about what I've shown in this video, then let me know with a comment. You can alternatively message me on Discord. If you're new here and you want to stay up to date with what I do on this channel, then make sure that you're subscribed and you can turn on the bell notifications to get notified by YouTube. Finally, if you enjoyed this video, let me know with a like. That way I can gauge what kind of videos you guys are into. With that being said though, I hope you enjoyed the video and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye bye.